guys, and welcome to the next episode of the TRA Performance Education Podcast with your tiny titan host, Vicky Mirceta. I know I swapped from Don't Fear the Way to TRA, but I'm very versatile like that. Just like my guest, who is by the name of Ash Cox this morning. Ash, how are you? Thank you for getting up bright and early and bushy-tailed this morning to come and have a chat.
I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm all right. I've got a cup of Yorkshire in my hand, so I'm good to go.
Very nice. Oh, I've got a cup of Tigger in my hand. For people who can't see me, usually mine's a Tigger. And I don't have Yorkshire. I've got decaf coffee in mine this morning. But anyway, all right then, Ash. So for people who don't actually know who you are in the industry, just give us a little bit of an overview and your background and what your interests are.
Yeah, okay. So I'm moving into academics, if you like, or I am an academic. I keep trying to put it off. I get imposter syndrome and feel that I'm not allowed to walk alongside them. But essentially, I'm on my PhD at the moment over at Edge Hill University, working underneath Rob Noonan and Stuart Fairclough and Maria Christina. So I've got quite a good team supporting me, really, and supervising the work that I do.
Yeah.
My background, I was in the military before going into academia, and as part of that process, and one of my later postings was part of the physical training corps, the Royal Army Physical Training Corps, in a rehabilitation setting. Yeah, so it was good crack. And the last post I was in was up at Catterick, so I was working with young lads predominantly coming through, and they were looking at joining the parachute regiment. So we had people coming off P Company, and it'd be our job to rehab them and put them back in the system. Right. And I was going through my bachelor's degree at the time, and as I was kind of looking at them coming through, you could see they were all coming through the same pathology. So they all come through with shin splints predominantly. And so what we did is we started looking at the strength in their lower limb and whether we could draw some form of correlation really between the shin splints that we were witnessing at Catterick and the amount of strength that they had in their lower limb. And the reason for doing it really was we were trying to compare it to the old NSCA statement that you should be able to squat 1.5 times your body weight as an adult for one repetition before you perform plyometric training. And these young lads essentially couldn't squat 60 kilo with good form. So I kind of ran with that, and then that snowballed. I left there once I had an opportunity to do a PhD and pursue my PhD. So that's where I'm at, really.
Fantastic. Okay. So now you are predominantly focusing on youth strength and how to obviously incorporate that into schools. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So traditionally, I mean, I'm not sure how much your listeners know, but there's a set of guidelines that's written by the World Health Organization, and that's kind of mirrored as well by the Chief Medical Officer in the UK. Yeah. So these were produced in 2011. You probably see the infographics. You see them in doctor surgeries. You see them in some schools as well. And it states that we want the youth to be doing 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity, so getting the heart rate up and running around on a daily basis. And we also want them to spend or reserve 3 days a week to incorporate additional resistance exercise as well, or exercise as we take it from the statement that strengthens muscle and bone, which is resistance exercise. Yeah. So traditionally, when we've explored the literature, everyone's happy with the moderate to vigorous physical activity side of things. We're not having much of an impact.
And everything else.
That's it. We're not having much of an impact anyway. It's changed by about 4 minutes when we monitor it objectively. And when there's a database called the International Child Accelerometry Database, which essentially takes everything that's been objectively measured and puts it all into one holding pool.
Right.
And what they found is only about 9 and 3% of boys and girls are actually meeting the guidelines anyway on a daily basis.
Wow, really? That low?
It's pretty shocking, isn't it? It is pretty shocking. I mean, we're getting increasingly obese, if you like. It has plateaued off a little bit. It's leveled out, but I've kind of looked at it as a way of using it as to my advantage. So I want to try and use obesity to my advantage. So what I've done is we've looked at sort of resistance training as maybe the platform to enable people to get more involved with physical activity at a young age and hopefully try and pick it up. there's a huge psychological, I'm sure I don't have to tell your listeners, but a huge psychological and physiological benefit to conducting physical activity. And that's before we've even looked at the athletic populations as well. So on a general populations standpoint, the benefits are huge anyway. So it's quite worrying that it's not been taken with and ran with already. I feel like I'm doing something that should have been done years ago, but
it is. And I think the reason for that is for the simple fact that we do come up against a lot of resistance ourselves, don't we, from parents and from teachers. And I mean, they just think, they automatically assume resistance training means and involves lifting heavy weights.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of I'm just going to basically call out. There was a lot of bullshit that went around, wasn't there, about lifting weights at a young age was going to stunt their growth, and nothing was going to be beneficial for them that was going to cause brittle bones, and that's the reason why we just stuck to things like tennis, and there was a little bit of rugby going on for the boys, and then, of course, everybody did the proverbial crappy bleep test, which I have to say is still going on today. My daughter comes home every Monday and goes, "We did PE today." Brilliant. Oh, right, yeah, what did you do with the bleep test? Oh, right, excellent. So what kind of resistance do you come up against in regards to this? Have you seen much of the same?
Yeah, it's exactly like you say. Even from, I mean, you kind of expect it from the parents. You get that and understand that, and I try and do some work in the community where I can with regards to resistance exercise. In a school setting. So what we get is we get a report card, a physical activity report card we get as a country. The last one was produced in 2016 by Wilkie and colleagues.
Yeah.
What we found is the traditional team sports that we witness in schools are on the decline anyway. So I think Sport England published a survey in 2015, and they looked at the participation rates in traditional sport and exercise. So we're looking at football, rugby, all these team sports that you traditionally associate with school PE. And in that publication, it was like, a huge amount. I mean, 2/3 of these individuals are engaging in team sports at least once a week. But it was very much survey based. So when Wilkie and colleagues went out in 2016 and looked at it objectively, what they found is they're actually on a decline, and outside of the school setting. So once we stopped just looking at the school setting and putting that down as a tick in the box on the survey, there's actually only about 19% of youth engaged in team sports actively outside the curriculum. And it kind of mirrors what Ken Green said back in 2014. So he spoke about how by keeping this traditional sort of standpoint, we're going to fail to involve the least engaged youth in sport moving forward, which obviously if we don't harvest the right attitudes now in adolescence, that's going to carry on into adulthood and anyway, and then they're never going to be involved, so they're not going to meet the adult guidelines then, and it spirals out of control. And obviously the economic and physical burden of that moving forward on the nation and worldwide is huge. And what we've got to consider as well is as educators, as physical educators in school, or whether you've got these as athletes outside of the school environment, or whether you're doing extracurricular stuff, we're kind of cultivators and ambassadors for physical activity, if you like, moving forward. Once you leave school, as we all know, no one's going to hold your hand through a physical activity program. That's your last chance, really, to get to really ingrain it in a where you've given 2 hours a week. It's not much, but you're given 2 hours a week to kind of get involved and try and cultivate some positive relationships with physical activity moving forward. And I think that if we're going to do this and we're going to do it right, we need to set these young girls and guys up with and expose them to training modalities that they're going to face and are indicative of the everyday gymnasium environment. Because they leave school at 16 and they go out thinking, I'm going to go into the gym and just do press-ups, and it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? Like you walk straight in and you'll start snatching and cleaning and jerking and that, and you're thinking, well, why haven't we taken them in school and started to harvest this and teach them the right skills? It's all about teaching them to be able to move into the outside world essentially and get involved long term. But it kind of doesn't happen, which is worrying.
It is, and especially with what the schools are actually doing these days as well. I mean, I remember just a couple of weeks ago there was the bad weather that obviously came on, and instead of, and because of the PE, their PE lesson outside was cancelled, but instead of just moving PE inside and doing something like you were saying, it could have been just like a mini version of the CrossFit workout or something, you know, squat jumps, box jumps, you know, sprints, rows, whatever. You could do that all on the inside. They just decided to sit down and watch a movie. And it's just like, you know, where is that even comparable? It isn't comparable. You know, you want to swap something out like for like, then why aren't we doing that in schools?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, what do you see? I saw something very interesting actually on social media not so long ago that we are the second most obese nation that there is in the world, apart from we're just behind the USA now, aren't we?
That's right, yeah.
I mean, it's scary, and it is coming down into childhood obesity as well.
Yeah.
And the problem is that when we compare ourselves to Japan actually get all of their kids in schools taking part in their lunch hours, and lunch hour isn't just a break for them, it's still an educational lesson. So they learn about what's in their food, they cook it, they clean up, they serve it to others, which obviously learns discipline and instills good work ethic as well. But they understand everything that goes into their bodies, and they have got the lowest obesity rate going in the world. And they also take part in fundamental weightlifting activities as well. So why is it that we are so behind the times with people like Japan and China when it comes to this?
I think it's just it's fear. It's scaremongering. There was work done back in the 60s and 70s that essentially, you know, you're going to damage an immature skeleton if you start doing resistance training and loading them. And you know, as we know now, the science has got better, and we know that just isn't the case. When you look at English school children specifically, there's been a 27%. I think Cohen and colleagues did a study or published a study in 2011. And basically, this was a longitudinal study. It was done over 10 years, and they had a few different markers that they looked at to measure strength. And what they found is over those 10 years, is we've actually seen a 27% decrease or decline in muscular fitness in English school children.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's quite shocking. So if we're seeing this...
Sorry, can I just put in there? So you're actually talking muscle atrophy there in a percentage of decline, or are you just saying a lack of development?
A lack of development, I'd say, is probably because I think when you're talking about hypertrophy and such like in youth, it's not really there. It's, you know, obviously we're going to get an element of that, but most of what we get really is we're capitalizing on like the synergistic effects of physiological adaptations.
Okay.
So what we're talking about there is during like pre-adolescence, if you like. So we're starting in primary school here now. We've got like a heightened neural proliferation pathway, and the central nervous system as well is also maturing. So we've got like that window really to try and capitalize and get in and make a difference just from a neurological perspective. But we don't because we're not exposing them to resistance training, we're not having that chance to get in there, if you like. And when you look at the literature, really, if the more we can increase the load and the stress on the body, that adds a stimulus to neural proliferation. So we can actually harvest it and take it forward and enhance it. And I think going with that as well, if you think of, obviously that's in the school environment where it's not really being used, but also if you can apply that to the athletic environment as well. So there's a lot of coaches out there who will, you know, if they're a say soccer, then that's bad. That's because I speak to someone else the other day. So you've got a football coach, we're looking at long-term athletic development now. So if you've got a footballer, if you like, what they'll do is they'll just play football over and over and over and over and over again. Whereas we're missing out now on these long-term benefits. So this is when we start talking about early specialization, and maybe we're not going to get as, you know, develop them as well as we could have if we actually put in place a proper, robust strength and conditioning program.
Right.
And I think it's moving along. Like within elite sport, it is moving along and it's catching up. You know, but I still have concerns over the education environment. So And it doesn't take long to get an improvement in these youth, because they're so responsive to it. I mean, there was a study in 2005 by Meyer and colleagues, and they actually elicited, I think it was like a 92 or around, it was 92% increase in strength in the lower limb, and that was done in females at the time.
Oh, wow, okay, interesting.
But it just fits in nice though with a term. So if a school term is 5 or 6 weeks, then why can't we put a proper structured S&C program, if you like, into the school environment and develop that? And there's, the knock-on effect is huge. We're not saying we want them to be, professional weightlifters or whatever it may be. However, as we know, and as we've already highlighted there, Cohen and colleagues has found this decline to be there and present really with English school children.
Yeah.
And when you look at, we talked about motor skill there briefly, and if we can develop this motor skill and this positive association with physical activity in youth and children, then moving forward, it should make our lives a bit easier as strength educators when we get them as clients at 25 years of age, 30 years of age. Because what happens is if they're not engaged during adolescence and during youth, Feigenbaum and Meyer put forward in 2013 a cascade of adverse events, or adverse health outcomes essentially. And what it is, it's a little coil, and at the top it's nice, nice and big, the funnel. We've got loads of opportunity, and then down at the bottom it's a little tiny spike. And what they look at is essentially at the top you've got muscle strength, and as that decreases, so does motor skill competence, which is what we spoke about there, because they haven't capitalised on that modality. And once they start losing motor skill competence, they're going to lose confidence as well. So they're going to become further disengaged and step back. That's where you're going to get that knock on team sports. Now they're in secondary school and they're thinking, well, I can't move like they can, and I haven't got the coordination that they've got, so I'm going to step back a little bit. Sedentary behaviour goes up. Yeah. And then obviously with that, so do the risk factors and the likelihood of adverse health, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your opinion, just because I've seen it on a number of occasions as well, with the sedentary lifestyle also comes with poor nutrition habits as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, 100%. And when we were looking at how we were going to roll these studies out, we were like, right, there's only so much we can throw at it. So we kind of, the way we're doing it, we want to capitalise on having that positive association first. So as you know, when you get a client, it's a lot easier to kind of change their relationship, so the psychological aspect of it first, before we can start getting the buy-in in other areas.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do, we're trying to get that synergistically. We're trying to work both at the same time. So Hoare and colleagues in 2016 actually spoke about capitalising on obesity, which is what I said at the beginning. So what we can do there now is, once we start harvesting the positive psychological aspect, we can start looking at nutrition and such like. But as Hoare expressed in 2016, when we're getting these obese and overweight individuals, because they have a higher fat mass, they may also have a higher fat-free mass.
Yeah.
Traditionally, what happens in school and even in athletic at a young age, because they don't understand resistance exercise, which is completely safe for them, and it's around the age of 6. That's where it's been proven from. In America and Australia, that's ingrained, but we're kind of slow on the uptake here in the UK. But essentially, these obese and overweight individuals, we need to allow them the chance to express themselves in an absolute manner, as opposed to a relative manner.
Right.
So traditionally, we'll have them doing press-ups, sit-ups, squats. Okay, but if you've got an 80 kilo overweight child and you've got a 50, 60 kilo child, if they're both doing 10 press-ups, there's a big difference in the weight that's actually being moved if you look at the actual load volume at the end.
Definitely, yeah.
So that's where we're kind of looking there now, and we're saying, well, actually, why don't we take these individuals who possess a higher fat mass, because also that's indicative of a higher fat-free mass, and let them express themselves in an absolute manner. So let's get in there and let them squat, deadlift, bench press, overhead press, because there's nothing wrong with it. We know it's safe. We know it's what they're going to face in the real world, if you like, once they leave school. And we're also sort of capitalizing on the positive psychological relationship now. So when they're looking to their left and right on these sessions, when these sessions are put in place, they look up and down the line or up and down the racks to the left and right of them, and they're actually lifting more than what the captain of the football team was, or what the captain of the, maybe rugby is a bad example because that's already ingrained in there, but maybe more than the captain of the rugby team is, and if they're very obese or very overweight, they're probably going to, lift quite a bit of weight. So we're giving them that chance there to find their sort of their talent, if you like, on the physical activity spectrum, and run away with it and develop it. And all the while, you're developing that, making advantage of that neural proliferation that we see during pre-adolescence and adolescence. So we're laying down, positive pathways in terms of motor control and motor skill competence. And we can develop that and move forward. And what that does, that allows them, whether or not they stay with resistance exercises, I'm not really too bothered. I just want them to be active. So if they move forward now and they go, well, I was good at that, actually, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to start running a little bit. I'm going to start cycling a little bit. And then all of a sudden now you've got this positive psychological buy-in, and it's all underpinned by self-determination theory, and resistance exercise kind of feeds into that quite well when you look at the recommendations that were put down by Feigenbaum in terms of how to prescribe resistance exercise, if you like. So.
Excellent. I like that. And I think that's a really nice note to finish on as well, Ash, is the quote unquote start them young.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it works though. The start them young kind of thing. People always had a go at me. My son was a gymnast, and he was in the boys squad for gymnastics, and he was very, very high level elite. And the looks that I used to get from women when I used to pick him up at 8:30 at night and give him a protein shake, after he's just been training, by the way, for 4 hours non-stop. And gymnastics is resistance exercise. He's running, he's jumping, he's lifting his own body weight, he's throwing himself around a bar, muscle ups on rings. That's hardcore work. He's breaking down that muscle tissue. And I said, here you go, here's your shake. And, people ask, I can't believe that you're giving that. They'll grow too quick and they'll grow over and above their frame. And I said, you know what? If that was the case, we would be surrounded by muscle monsters, walking around if protein actually did that for you. Do you give your kids chicken breasts? Yes. Well, then you can give them protein shakes. There's absolutely bugger all difference for it. And actually, they'll have a better response if they're going to have a whey shake straight after anyway. But that's my little mum rant going on. We're not going to go on to that one. So anyway, I digress. Where can the listeners find you, follow your work, ask you any follow-up questions if they need to?
Yes, so we've set up our own little company, if you like. So we're under the Redwood Performance Institute. Cool. And what we do, we deal with general populations. We go into schools and assist schools with strength conditioning programs. But also as well, you can follow our work of elite sport. So we've got, you can't say too much, can you? But we've got a couple of skiers who are looking to go into the Olympics or the Winter Olympics, and a couple of tennis players as well who we're developing at the moment. And we've done work with various different rugby and football clubs as well at an elite level. So you can kind of catch up there, and we put out little tips and hints as to where we should be putting our efforts, or where the science kind of suggests we should put our efforts, if you like.
Brilliant. And what I'll do is I'll get all of the links off you afterwards and put them all into the comment section on here. So if anybody does obviously want to ask anything about this particular podcast, then please just do put comments in the comments box on here. Give Ash a follow. Obviously, myself, you all know me from Tiny Titans, so that's where I am. If you've got any questions for myself, then obviously put those in, and any questions for Lee and Paul, the boys at TRA, then we'll get back to you as soon as possible. So that is it from me this morning. It from Ash as well, and lots of love. We will catch up with you in the next episode. Thanks very much, Ash.
Thank you.